Hello, San Juan County. As I was saying a moment ago, but you couldn't hear me, I was a little startled when I first walked in. I'm not used to getting that kind of reception in Washington, D.C., so I'm thrilled to be here in the state of Utah. I'm thrilled to be here with you in San Juan County. After being in Washington for many weeks, I have to say it feels great to be back in the United States of America. Before we get started today, I'm pleased to announce that we're going to have the benefit of a performance by representatives of the Southern Ute Tribe and of the White Mesa Ute Tribe, who are going to welcome us with a traditional honor dance. Let's welcome them to the stage. Okay, I think we're back. Can you hear me now? Okay. I'm going to have to bang the gavel again now, just to make it official. Welcome to this official field hearing of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. As a member of that committee, I'm pleased to be here with you today. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to San Juan High School for hosting us today. Very kind of you to let us use the wonderful facility. It's an honor also just to be here in Blanding. This is on the edge of Utah's canyon country. And I think anyone, does that one finally work? Fantastic, that makes it easier. This is truly one of the most spectacular places on earth. And I've commented to my staff and to some of your local elected officials here today, and it's amazing that anyone who ever lives here would ever want to leave, because it is so beautiful. And the physical beauty of the surroundings here is matched only by the quality of the people who live here and love their community and want to make sure that their community is strong and vibrant and remains a great place for their children, for their grandchildren. It's no coincidence that every year people travel great distance from all over the United States, all over the state of Utah, and indeed all over the world, just to have their breath taken away by the sights of the canyons, of the natural bridges, the rivers and lakes, the valleys and the cliffs, and of course the Bears Ears Buttes, which incidentally I visited this morning. We climbed to the top of the East Bears Ear. All these things are just sitting right in your backyard. But as everyone knows here, there's much more to this part of our state than just its natural beauty. For the people of the Navajo Nation who live here in San Juan County and whose forefathers first settled these canyons many hundreds of years ago, this corner of the world, known as Bears Ears, isn't just a place you call home. It's sacred ground. It's a source of meaning, a source of sustenance, a place where you meditate, where you gather and pray and hold ceremonies. And it's what unites the generations of families and tribes, forming an organic and permanent bond that connects past, present, and future, all in one place and all at one time. Taking care of ancestral land, protecting and preserving it for the next generation, isn't optional for many Native Americans. It's a sacred duty. It's part of life. It's part of their tradition and their deeply rooted religious belief. Now, the same is true in my own faith. As a lifelong member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I believe that, pursuant to church teachings, that God has created this earth for the benefit of man, and that man has a sacred duty to use this earth wisely and prudently, with thanksgiving and with concern for those who will live in future generations. The people of the Navajo Nation living in San Juan County have always faithfully fulfilled this responsibility in the Bears Ears region, caring for their homelands and respecting it for as long as anyone can remember, just as their forefathers did, is the cultural lifeblood of the Navajo people of southeastern Utah. Take away their access to the land, restrict their stewardship over the earth's bounty, and it may not be long before their culture begins to suffer as a result. You can't take that away, not without doing serious damage. Yet that's exactly what the Obama administration is contemplating with the potential national monument designation in the Bears Ears region. I'd like to put forth four simple goals that I believe are most likely shared by everyone in this room, by the people of San Juan County, and I believe even by the White House. First, we need to protect Bears Ears for future generations to enjoy, just as we today enjoy it, and just as our forefathers going back centuries have enjoyed it. Second, to continue in perpetuity Native American use of the land that has spiritually and physically sustained them for many hundreds of years. Third, establish Native American co-management of the Bears Ears region. And fourth, preserve multiple use of lands where doing so does not conflict with conservation goals. Now, if these are our goals, our shared goals, history proves that they can't be achieved if we try to pursue them by simply having the President of the United States from a distant perch in Washington, D.C., designating Bears Ears as a national monument. The Antiquities Act, which the President would use to make a national monument designation, simply does not allow for the inclusive, grassroots-based land management required by these shared goals that I've outlined. That's the bad news. But the good news is that there is a better way. It's called the Public Lands Initiative, which is a piece of legislation that's been written to achieve what a monument designation cannot. Instead of simply hoping that current and future land managers will cooperate and work equitably with the people of San Juan County, the PLI would codify into law clear and fair land management guidelines that ensure that Native Americans and other residents of San Juan County will be actively involved in the preservation of Bears Ears. The PLI is different than the proposed national monument in this respect, because unlike the proposed national monument, the PLI requires no leap of faith. No leap of faith that suddenly, without any standards agreed upon in advance, federal land managers are just going to work cooperatively with local residents. But before we introduce today's witnesses, it's worth acknowledging who is not here, who's not in the room with us, who's not present for this field hearing today. And among those people who are not with us today are officials from the United States Department of the Interior and officials from the United States Forest Service, as well as members of the group that calls itself the Bears Ears Coalition. Now, just to be clear, they were all invited. Representatives from each of those entities were invited, but they declined to participate in today's hearing. This, I believe, is proof that we did not try, as some may suggest, to quote-unquote stack the deck with our panel of witnesses today. We would have preferred, of course, to have had witnesses from opposing viewpoints so as to clarify the debate. And that's exactly why we began scheduling this hearing well over a month ago, to give everyone from all sides of this issue enough time to plan to be here as we try to find consensus on this important issue. But I cannot force the Obama administration. I cannot force representatives of the U.S. Department of the Interior or the U.S. Forest Service. And I cannot force members of the Bears Ears Coalition to sit down and speak to you today. They would have to do so voluntarily, and they've chosen to decline our invitation to do that. Well, I was pleased that Secretary Jewell and other federal officials visited Utah a couple of weeks ago. Governor Herbert and the federal delegation were unable to join her because of the voting schedule of the U.S. House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and the official business of the National Governors Association. I had hoped that today's hearing, which Secretary Jewell has known about for over a month, could have served as an opportunity for at least someone in the administration, if not Secretary Jewell herself, perhaps a representative, to engage with those of us unable to make the trip last week, and to those of you who tried to attend but were unable to do so because of the significant space constraints that kept many people from attending that meeting. Sadly, their absence here today seems to fit within a long-standing pattern. After members of the PLI requested a meeting with the Bears Ears Coalition to discuss updates to the initiative, leadership of the Bears Ears Coalition responded and said, quote, "We respectfully decline your invitation. We are satisfied that a Bears Ears National Monument proclaimed by President Obama under his authority granted by the Antiquities Act presents the best opportunity to protect the Bears Ears landscape and to assure a strong Native American voice in monument management," close quote. But the debate over the future of Bears Ears is far from finished, much as some would like to pretend otherwise. Everyone here, the fact that you are here, the fact that you've given up a perfectly good block of time in the middle of a perfectly good week to be here demonstrates that this debate is not over, that it shouldn't be over. So we hope that the Bears Ears Coalition will reconsider and will meet with us to discuss how best to preserve Bears Ears and how best to preserve Bears Ears in a way that is consistent with the will and the wishes of the people most directly affected by any action taken in this area. Now, my door is always open. As a matter of housekeeping, I'd like to remind everyone that this field hearing today is the same as a hearing in the United States Senate. Even though we're not in Washington, D.C., this is a hearing of the Senate, of the U.S. Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. We're here to gather information from witnesses and examine a very important issue near and dear to our hearts, the impact of large-scale monument designations. The regular rules that would apply to a Senate hearing will also apply here. In order to allow for time to answer questions and have a bit more dialogue with everyone who took the time to travel today, we will transition to a town hall format immediately following the conclusion of this formal hearing. Governor Herbert, Chairman Bishop, and I will answer questions about PLI or a national monument, and I'll invite audience members advocating for a national monument to join us in that conversation, which again will occur immediately following the formal portion of this committee hearing. To ensure that all perspectives are heard, time will be evenly divided between opponents and proponents of a national monument during the town hall section of this meeting. Before introducing our esteemed witnesses who have generously joined us today, I'd like to take a moment to thank Principal Bob Peterson and the entire staff of the San Juan High School for graciously allowing us to use this facility today. Let's give them a round of applause. Principal Peterson, where are you? Yeah, there he is. Give him another round of applause. There he is. Okay, it's now time for us to hear from our great panel of witnesses. As a reminder to each of these witnesses, you'll each have a few minutes to present your oral testimony that you prepared in advance. Any additional written testimony will be accepted for the record for 2 weeks following today's hearing. So feel free to supplement the record with any additional material if you'd like to do so, but do it within 14 days. After all witnesses provide their testimony, we will follow with a round of questions before finishing the hearing and moving on to the town hall. Our first witness, who I'm now pleased to announce, is the Honorable Gary Herbert, the current governor of the state of Utah. I'd like to thank you, Governor Herbert, for taking the time to be here today and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us in Blanding to share your thoughts. Governor Herbert.
Well, thank you, Senator Lee, and I'm honored to be here with you. And for the record, I am Gary Herbert, Governor of the great state of Utah, and honored to be here to talk about what I think is a very important subject for the entire state of Utah, not just for San Juan County, but for the entire state of Utah and beyond our borders. So I know this is an important discussion, and thank you, Senator Lee, for holding this important hearing. And I appreciate the invitation to come here and speak on behalf of the people of Utah. We have differences of opinion on this issue. I understand politics, and sometimes the media seems to emphasize the differences that we have on different issues. And I'd like to just remind everybody that I think this is an issue that most of us have some consensus on. You've kind of already highlighted that, Senator Lee, by talking about the desire that most everyone has to have some kind of preservation of the Bears Ears area. To preserve and protect those uniquenesses that we find in that beautiful part of our state here in San Juan County. And so as we talk about this, the discussion really is, we don't have opposition to the protection. Really the discussion seems to be revolving around how do we in fact implement protection of the Bears Ears area. And how should we in fact go about that? Process does count, and I think that's important for us all to remember of the process that we're involved with here on either side of this issue. And so as we talk about this today, I hope we don't lose sight of the fact we have consensus on preservation and protection. We have a common goal, so the discussion really should focus around how best to achieve this shared goal. And I hope that tomorrow's media headline, rather than emphasizing the differences and the divisiveness, emphasizes the consensus and the common goal that most everybody has about the preservation and protection of the Bears Ears. Now, as I get into my view of this thing, let me just mention a key principle that I think pertains to most all of us as we see the effective use of government power. We've heard the phrase many times that government closest to the people governs best. That's because it's reflective of those who they are nearest to. I believe that states have a significant role to solve problems of most of the issues that we talk about today. And with all due respect to those in Washington, D.C., I think that in fact solutions come better from the states and the local governments on most issues, whether it be health care, it could be human services, education, for example, public safety, and yes, even the public lands. Certainly those who have it in their backyard that bear the brunt of whatever decisions are made regarding the public lands ought to have their voices heard, considered, and respected as part of the ability to come up with the appropriate and final solution. And I would say that no one, I do mean no one, understands the challenges that are uniquely so to the public lands than those who live next door and amongst the public lands, and so our citizens here should be heard. This principle we call federalism. I know Congressman Bishop has been a big champion for the idea of shared responsibilities. It is something that I've championed as the chairman, as you know, Senator Lee, for the National Governors Association. States finding solutions and solving people's problems at that level seem to be much more effective in getting things done as we look around this great country. And so that falls with kind of the principle I see here in solving this particular challenge and unique problem we face here. I also believe in accountability. Those who are elected by the people bear the burden of accountability to those who put them into office. And I think that is much more germane to the issue than some unelected bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. that really has not seen, been here, or very seldom understands the backyard that the people here see each and every day. So that accountability that we have and owe to our citizens of this state is best borne by those who are elected to the office. So one of the biggest lessons I think we've learned over time is that local input is critical to getting success and to get buy-in to whatever the solution is to the problem at hand. And I think there's a significant difference to we, the people of Utah, who have something done to us as opposed to something that's done with us. And we seen that significantly 20 years ago when we had the Grand Staircase Escalating Monument in 1996, when we feel as a state that something was done to us and not with us. The process was in fact closed. There was not openness, there was not transparency. In fact, from the highest office in the land, we were in fact lied to, Senator, about what was going to happen on that designation. And consequently, the results are 20 years later, we still have animus, anger, and distrust for the federal government because of that lack of process and having something done to us. We have evidence of visceral anger still today because of that bad process. So that being said, process matters. Again, I think people can get together around the table, talk about their differences, and deal in good faith. And I think that's what the intent has been here, to deal in good faith. So we have two different competing arguments here: a national monument designation by one person who says, with the wave of the hand, this is what's going to be, or we have a process that we've done legislatively that's taken many years in the process of bringing people to the table, led by Congressman Bishop and others of our congressional delegation, and saying, let's see if we can't build a consensus and pass something legislatively that in fact will give us something that we feel like we've been done with as co-partners in this, as opposed to done to. And so again, I know that sometimes that's hard. It's not easy. It's much easier to be a monarchy. It's much easier to be a dictator and say, this is how I decree it. It's much more difficult, in fact, to bring people together and discuss the issues, the pros and the cons, and reason together and find compromise. And some people don't like compromise. It's my way or the highway. But I think for us in Utah, we understand that compromise is not a dirty word, and it's something that's necessary to find the good for the whole. And so, again, I appreciate that aspect of what's being done here. And I appreciate Congressman Bishop having over 1,000 different public meetings and trying to bring consensus and bring people together. Not doing this has a host of negative consequences that can take place. And again, we know people have different points of view, but I think what we have with the PLI now, the Public Land Initiative, is in fact a somewhat of a culmination of much work and effort by many people, and not just the result of some kind of media hype or out of state or out of area lobbying campaign or editorial campaign, as opposed to really hearing the voice of the people. I think, as you can tell, I'm in the camp of doing this legislatively as opposed to a national monument. I think it's the best way to bring consensus and bring goodwill out of the end product. And there's probably a lot of reasons that we'll talk about here this afternoon about why this is a better way. But it's the only way we can truly guarantee the outcome is through legislative action. You've already touched on that, Senator Lee, that the only way we can have a guarantee of the outcome and the process of management going forward is through legislative action. I expect, and Congressman Bishop can talk to this, that the current version of the PLI is not the final edition. I expect there's opportunities to modify in some way and fine-tune to address some of the issues that maybe have been raised since it's been released. But I believe that the PLI represents our best chance to find a way to find kind of what I call the messy middle. Not everybody's always happy about the middle, but compromise is what we need to look for here in this process, and I think the PLI gives us a chance to do that. Let me just say a couple more things if I could before I sign off, and I have extended my remarks, which will be on file for you to look at. But again, I mentioned the fact that the challenges that are uniquely so with the National Monument enforcement. Again, the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument, 1.9 million acres. They have one forest ranger to enforce law enforcement and take care of the management responsibilities on that area. That's way too few when it comes down to it. And if you don't have local buy-in, it makes it very difficult, in fact, to manage the properties. The Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument Manager's Report for 2014 read this way. Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument is experiencing constantly increasing recreational use as a result of national and international advertising promoting it as an iconic canyon country destination. This presents management challenges balancing use with adequate protections of the monument's objective and values. Increased backcountry visitor impacts include increased graffiti, human waste issues, water quality concerns, and parking congestions. Dispersed campsites are proliferating. Planning efforts are needed to ensure adequate use management and resource protection. Now that's cost money and resources. I don't think that those who've been arguing for protection of Bears Ears want to see that kind of end result. And so just doing it as a national monument, I think, has unintended consequences, which I think, in fact, our Native American brothers and sisters would not like to see happen. This last year, the Grand Staircase Escalante had 1,400 reported cases of vandalism. According to the BLM, there have been only 25 cases of vandalism reported in the Bears Ears region since 2011. Again, I'll say it again, 1,400 cases of vandalism on the Grand Staircase Escalante last year alone, and only 25 cases since 2011 in the Bears Ears area. That's 140 times more common vandalism in an area that we want to respect and treat as sacred lands. Let me just give you some comparison numbers too, Senator. As we look at the size and magnitude of this monument, 1.9 million acres being proposed. It's by comparison larger than the entire state of Rhode Island. Just over, we have 3,000 square miles in the monument. Rhode Island is 1,200 square miles. Rhode Island currently has 93 state troopers to patrol an area that is, again, about 40% larger or smaller than the Bears Ears region. They have, BLM has 2 full-time officers assigned on patrol to protect the entire Bears Ears region. In Rhode Island, Providence, the responsibility for that area is comprised of 20.5 square miles. The Providence Police Department has a budget of $69 million last year. $69 million. Just so, again, for comparison, the entire budget of the BLM National Conservation Land System nationwide, Senator, you know this probably as well as anybody, responsible for over 50,000 square miles of protected lands, is only $64 million. So the resources to be committed to this thing are going to be sparse indeed if we look at the reality. So proper protection, I think, is important, but cooperation from local communities to have buy-in is why I think the PLI presents us with the best option. A unilateral monument designation will divide the people, not only here in Utah, but elsewhere. I think division is not healthy for what we're trying to accomplish with the Bears Ears region. On the other hand, a legislative consensus solution like the PLI, as proposed by Congressman Bishop, has the potential to bring people together, to ensure local cooperation, and put in place a durable solution, not only for the short term, but for the long-term benefits of the people of Utah, the people of San Juan County, our Native American friends, and for the people of America. It will give us the best long-term benefit in protecting and conserving public lands, and nearly 18 million outside of just the Bears Ears region. So the intended consequences of the PLI much go beyond just the Bears Ears area, and a national monument creation would knock that all out the window and eliminate all the potential that we have with the PLI that goes above and beyond the Bears Ears. So there's a right way to do this, I believe, and a wrong way to do it. The process involved, the PLI, is in fact the right way, and my sincere hope is that with your help and the congressional work of the House and the Senate, that we can show the current administration, President Obama and his folks, that this is a better way. If you really care about the land, that this is not some kind of a political tomahawk to be used, no pun intended. If this really is about, in fact, the Bears Ears region protecting, conserving the land, the PLI is by far the superior way to go about doing it. So thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Governor Herbert, for your testimony. We're now going to be privileged to hear from our next witness, who is Congressman Rob Bishop. Congressman Bishop represents Utah's 1st Congressional District. He's also currently serving as the chairman of the House Natural Resources Committee. And as Governor Herbert just mentioned a moment ago, he has held more than 1,000 meetings around the state as he's worked relentlessly to put together his public lands initiative. Congressman Bishop.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. Was nice. If you do it when I finish, then I'll be impressed, but I'm not finished yet. Anyway, thank you. I'm happy to be back here with you, and I appreciate the invitation. I feel saddened that many in the administration have not taken the opportunity of joining us here in an official Senate hearing, which would have been extremely healthy. I also realize that there are some people that have said this hearing is biased. There is one thing I want to say about that. Of course it's biased. This is a Senate hearing. Everything the Senate does is biased. If it was on the House side, everything would be cool. We'd be great. It's just nothing personal, but that's the way. I do want to spend a second talking about the history of the Antiquities Act and then something also about PLI, especially as it relates to Bears Ears. The Antiquities Act was passed in 1906. I hope people realize there were only 46 states in the nation then. There was no Park Service, there was no BLM, there were very few environmental laws, in fact, none at all. In the debate on the floor of the House for that Antiquities Act, Congressman Lacey turned to a Westerner congressman by the name of Stevens and said, what we're trying to do is preserve old objects of special interest, which simply meant that the purpose of antiquities was to find a specific archaeological, scientific, or historical thing and preserve it. Unfortunately, some presidents have made like a marine national monument, and the antiquities was a whole bunch of fish. In Grand Staircase Escalante, I asked Katie McKinty what the specific entity was, and she said, well, there's a lot of interesting plants. Plants and fish are not antiquities. Second element was it had to be in immediate danger. So, for example, President Obama did Cesar Chavez's home. Now, that's an antiquity, a thing, but that was not in any danger of immediate harm. The third element was it always was supposed to be in the smallest area possible. So on the debate, they actually thought of amending the bill, and they debated it in the House floor, and the discussion was whether they should put a limit on how big these monuments should be, and the discussion was whether they should be 320 acres or 640 acres, not 1.9 million acres. They... Unfortunately, when they wrote it, they didn't put a specific number in there. They just said the smallest footprint possible, but you realize what the three things they were talking about concluded. Now, if this is all about management, the administration, it's already federal land, the administration has all sorts of tools, from NEPA and FLIPMA and everything else. This has got to be something more than simply about management. I think there's a political aspect to this, which is sad. It is also going to be said that lots of presidents have used the Antiquities Act, both Republican and Democrat. Big deal. The ones who have used it sparingly. FDR was elected 4 times, 4 terms. He only did use the Antiquities Act 4 times, and one of those was overturned. If you go from like the mid-1960s to the mid-1990s, that 30-year period, they had 7 presidents. Only one of those 7 presidents used the Antiquities Act. Of course, he used it 15 times, but there was only one who used it in that time period. So to me, there are 3 presidents who, in my estimation, have not used it, but have abused it. Most presidents do 1, 2, maybe 3 monument designations. Jimmy Carter did 15. Bill Clinton did his first one in his re-elect, which was Grand Staircase Escalante, and then 21 more as he left the door. And Barack Obama is trying to break that record now. He did 7 in his first term, and now he says he wants to have a legacy. To me, that's an abuse of it. Now, as much as I think the Antiquities Act is a legislative function mistakenly given to the executive branch, and the criteria is ignored today, and the practice is abused today, there is still a better way of doing conservation efforts, and I think the PLI initiative is what we're trying to do. It's been frustrating because we're trying to bring people who have never really compromised together before to actually compromise. That's frustrating, and it's taking a long time. But I think we do have a good bill, and specifically for this area, for Bears Ears, we have a better way of preserving the area. By having 2 conservation areas plus some wilderness gives flexibility for those who want to use it for the traditional activities as well as those who want to conserve it. But the important part to remember here is it can only be done if you actually write it in statute. For Grand Staircase Escalante, the proclamation said grazing rights would be preserved. They haven't been. They eventually change as time goes on, which is one of the reasons why we should do this statutorily, not in some proclamation that has not guaranteed what the future will be. That means that when we talk about management of this area, the management practice that is currently in this bill is the management that is legal now without changing any legislation. What the administration has promised that they would like to do as a co-management cannot legally be accomplished by the administration. But Senator, the Senate and the House can. If we were to put that statutorily into practice, then it could be done. And I think to me that's the key element. That you have to realize what the administration has promised as far as management of this land cannot be done. They cannot deliver. But congressionally in statute, we can deliver it, and we can make sure that it is guaranteed and stayed there permanently. So they may talk about executive orders of the past, even Freedom of Religion Act. In all of those, they are still dominated by the underlying legislation saying the Secretary of Interior shall do everything they talk about to the extent practical. That's the phrase I'm trying to get out of every piece of legislation coming through my committee, because it is too nebulous and it never guarantees what will or will not be the practices. It also has no cause of action. If you think the administration is doing something they weren't supposed to do and what they promised, there is no legal recourse about it. You're stuck. That is something that can be changed, and I'm going to tell you right now, unfortunately, I think the bill is done. I don't want to change it a whole lot. But there is one thing I'm willing to fine-tune, and fine-tune the management concept so that we can put into statute what will and will not be accomplished in there. We can actually have some kind of cooperative co-management practice, but doing it the right way. A presidential proclamation cannot guarantee squat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congressman Bishop. We're going to be privileged next to hear from Bruce Adams. In addition to being a San Juan County Commissioner, Bruce Adams is additionally qualified to testify before us because he is a fourth-generation rancher and knows this land as well as anyone. Commissioner Adams.
Thank you, Senator. I want to thank you on behalf of the San Juan County Commission for holding this hearing. In my lifetime, I'm not aware of any hearing by the Senate ever in our county. There may have been. I'm only 67, so. But thank you so much for doing this for not only us as commissioners, but for this constituency that is here today. They appreciate it very much, I know. As you stated, I am a public land grazer. I'm in the cattle business. So I'm here to represent the grazing community, to represent farmers and ranchers in San Juan County. I also want to make some comments about the city's watershed, both Monticello and Blanding, if you'll allow me to do that. First of all, a historical perspective might help you to understand the history, the grazing history in San Juan County. In 1879, families loaded into 80 wagons in Parowan, Utah, and began a journey to San Juan County. They brought with them 1,000 head of horses and cows. The purpose of this expedition was to establish a settlement among the Native American people and help them with their domestic needs. Even though the settlers encountered some hostility at first, they soon became great friends. After these families settled in what would be known as Bluff, Utah, 4 families moved to the base of the Blue Mountains and established the beginnings of the present-day community of Monticello. When these early settlers arrived at the base of the Blue Mountains, they were met by the LC and Carlisle cattle companies. These 2 cattle outfits were composed largely of Texas cowboys and outlaws hiding from their misdeeds. The grass was so plentiful in the area, it is a matter of historical record that each cattle company was running nearly 10,000 head of cows, 10,000 head of yearlings, east of Monticello and down in Verger Creek drainage. At this time, grazing was free and unregulated. As a result, these grazing companies, along with others, overgrazed the land in the name of quick profitability for their investors and with little regard for the land which they were grazing. The early settlers were anxious to find a place not being grazed by the large companies to graze their cattle that they had brought with them from Parowan. In the meantime, the federal government was developing policies for grazing public land, and in 1934 passed the Taylor Grazing Act. It was signed by President Roosevelt and was intended to, and I quote from the record, stop injury to the public grazing lands by preventing overgrazing and soil deterioration, to provide for the orderly use, improvement, and development, to stabilize the grazing, the livestock industry dependent upon the public range, end of quote. This act was welcomed by the livestock men here in San Juan County, and it brought stability to the settlers who depended on grazing the public land for their livelihood. On July 16, 1946, the Grazing Service and the General Land Office merged to form the Bureau of Land Management, or BLM. The BLM was in charge of the grazing permits that exist even today. These grazing permits have great value to the descendants of their ancestral families who obtained the rights to graze over 150 years ago. Many of the original grazing permits are still part of the family heritage that exists today. I would like to tell you the history of the BLM grazing permit I grazed my cattle on. The first holder of the grazing permit was a man named Darrell Redd. He passed that permit on to his son, Lemuel Hardison Redd. And then, through the guidelines of the BLM, I obtained the permit from him. Only 3 individuals have ever held the rights to graze that permit. I could give you many examples of families who have obtained their grazing permits from the settler ancestors. I just want to point out that these grazing permits are part of our heritage and obviously have great value to San Juan County, with the families continually participating in grazing throughout each generation. Agriculture is one of the most important industries in this county. In fact, it ranks among the top 2 of economic importance in the county. When you are raised in a family that depends on cattle grazing, it becomes part of your soul and fiber. You live and breathe the cattle business. You raise your children to love the land and take care of it so that it will take care of you. Cattlemen are the original environmentalists because they could see the value of good land management. We welcome new ideas and improved management practices, but with only 8% private property in this county, we must be able to graze public land. Congressional Code, Title 43, Chapter 8A, Subchapter 1-51B states, preference shall be given to issuance of grazing permits to those within or near a district who are landowners engaged in the livestock business. State Code 63-38D-4016M includes state policy for public land grazing and supports grazing of domestic livestock. I'm not sure what the new monument in San Juan County would do to livestock grazers, but I can tell you what has happened in Garfield County, Utah, after the designation of the Grand Staircase Escalante Monument. 106,000 AUMs were permitted at the time of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument creation. Approximately 40,000 were actually used in 2015, a 60% cut. Seedlings and vegetation treatment have not been maintained due to restrictive regulations. Prohibition against the non-native seeds have reduced rangeland health. Maintenance and improvement of water development has largely been eliminated. Monument designation has attracted visitors, creating conflicts with pre-existing livestock operations. Monument designations have closed roads and reduced access to range improvements and allotments. Land use restrictions and zoning regulations have complicated feeding, watering, herding, and managing livestock operations. Monuments always reduce AUMs. Watersheds of both Blanding and Monticello are included in the proposed Bears Ears National Monument that would devastate the communities of Monticello and Blanding. I urge you to do everything you can to stop this monument from happening in San Juan County. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's great to hear from you and appreciate your insights. Our next witness is Mr. Chester Johnson. We owe Mr. Johnson a great debt of gratitude for driving up from Anna today. I know he's busy caring for his 92-year-old mother, and so he's got a lot on his hands. Chester was born in this county, and he's lived almost his entire life here in San Juan County. He retired just a few years ago in 2010, although he doesn't look old enough to be retired, after a long career as a social worker, a career in which he was able to use his bachelor's degree and his master's degree that he earned from the University of New Mexico and from New Mexico Highland University, respectively, to help the Navajo people in his career in social work. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming out. My name is Chester Johnson. I am direct descendant from Gayeli, who was a Navajo warriors that had traveled in the Bears Ear region for many years. He believes in freedom and protection of land and independence. This is some things that we carry on within our family in the Aneth area. Many are living in Aneth area descended from this Gayeli warrior. Today I'm here to give testimony on sacredness of Bears Ear region. Also, I'm supporting the PLI proposal, and I will elaborate on the opposing Bears Ear Coalition proposal. Bear Ears is always sacred land to the Navajo. It's an inspiration to us, give us strength as well as give us healthy life. It provides good food and good hunting meat for us Native people. Annually, we came on and hunt and pick pinyons for food. Bears is also homeland for our ancestor. We go and in good mind, in good way to walk the land Bears Ear and give us a peaceful and renew our physical being as well as spiritual. This is the way we look at Bears Ears, and this is the way that our warriors, Gayeli, has courageously fought for its freedom and fought for it and maintain our land. When you walk on the land of Bears Ear, it's a beautiful area. It's an inspiration to us. And this is where we go for medicine and for prayer. This is why that we want protection for Bears Ear. And medicine person that goes out and get medicine, that's where they go for fresh medicine as well as conducting their ceremony. And we like to maintain this openness to our Native people, as well as for other people that using the land at the current stage. If President Obama succeeds in making Bears Ear land a national monument, the Utah Navajo will be shut off from traditional practice as well as harvesting medicine and conducting healing ceremony. Now I will go on to the supporting PLI proposal. To me, this proposal is express the needs, crucial needs of the Navajo people in relation to culture, spiritual belief, and economic development that could bring prosperity to Utah Navajo. Some of the things that I'll go point out in my speech here is, number one, PLI proposal advocate national mining area designation of Bears Ear and establish certain region of the wilderness area. The proposal majority is supported by Utah San Juan County citizen. This is a comprehensive land proposal put together by the citizen of San Juan County. No one is excluded. And we all encourage people to participate in making this proposal by public meeting throughout the counties. I was part of the group discussing this proposal from beginning to the end when it was sent to our commission last year. Because Utah Navajo were encouraged and they advocate for this proposal because it's respect and values the tie they have with the Bears Ear. It also leaves access to the things that they would need out of the Bears Ear region. Also, again, that it will bring prospect in the economic development through this proposal to reservation. There is heart and soul of this proposal is co-management, which has been some linked discussion among the panel up here, and we believe in it that can be done most of the county, and Navajo included in the South, believe that this is going to bring greater protection for our public land in San Juan County. Another thing that we Native people in the ENR region is that we favor this proposal because there's a possibility it's transferred in federal mineral right of the McCracken Mesa extension of the Navajo Nation to the Utah Navajo Trust Fund. These are the outstanding reasons why I support PLN proposal. I also think that I have the right to express my opinion and support for public land, how it should be controlled and managed. Through PLI proposal, we have the opportunity to establish or to create land management policy, as well as decisions that will assure greater protection for public land. And then when I mentioned too that I oppose Bears Ear Coalition proposal, here are some things that I feel that needs to be shared with the public, the way we see it from the NF area, NF chapter. Proposal was written only for a few people. Most of these were people that are from outside San Juan County. They were written, we feel that it was written by environmentalists, archaeologists, and rock climbers, and Indian tribe from New Mexico and Arizona. They lack the knowledge of the Bear's Ear. That's how we feel. And here they put it in some position that they can make decision and policy and make a national mind out of Bear's Ear land. Bear's Ear also, coalition is also proposing imposing national mine and closing 9.9 million acres. To us, this is an insane and senseless act. The motive for this type of action is greed, pride, and inclination of satisfying specific interest group. It totally excludes people of San Juan County. And this proposal does not benefit us. Proposal also established asking for the national mine as well as accessibility for Native people to use, obtain, and use natural resources. As explained, an Antiquity Act probably is not going to allow both ways. This is a tactic that was used with the Utah Navajo just to gather support for the proposal. And many Navajo are beginning to realize now this is what they're doing just to gain support for the proposal that they've written. Collateral management is what they call is going to be established to regulate the national monument that they hope to have established. I believe this system is not workable, and it's something that will bring Arizona and New Mexico try to manage our public land that is located here in San Juan County. And to me, there will be a lot of disagreement. How could these tribes manage our land? How would they work with us, Utah Navajo, as well as other ethnic groups in San Juan County? They have no knowledge as what we need and how we use this land. It's the way we look at it. Co-management board, Navajo Nation is mentioned as a tribal one of the members to seat at this table to regulate and manage this national mine that they hope to establish. in the past, we realized that Bears Ear region was in the United States Claims Endings Court. And Anna was pushing this to a level that we can have access back to Bears Ear region through this court. But Navajo tribe stepped in under Peterson's administration early 19, when the money was offered to the tribal government, over $30 million. And they accept that money, which means that the Navajo tribal nation we're told that they cannot touch case or matter relate to Bears Ear in the future. And here, that they designate Navajo Nation as being one of the board members to regulate this national monument that's going to be established. And many of us in the Annis area believe that we have a good chance in some way to reclaim some of this Bears Ear land through this court case. We protested. We said no to the Navajo Nation. Don't take the money. Let's pursue with the case. But it didn't happen. At that time, my father, who's deceased now, was official. And I traveled with him through different places that don't accept the money. We're still pursuing the case. But we lost. And it was sad that it has happened. And I'd just like to share this with the audience. This is how much the people in Anna are so involved and so tied to Bears Ear land. And the last one I'd like to share with you about the coalition proposal. It's a secret document. That's how we look at it. Anna people has never read it, or nobody has a full knowledge of what's in the proposal. This proposal doesn't mention what's good for Anna people. And they had never contributed to it. This is why that I oppose the coalition proposal. I am in support of Public Land Initiative proposal. It stands for National Conservation Area, and it stands for the wishes of Utah. It also will bring great protection for public land in San Juan County. And also, again, we really feel that on a PLI proposal, there's going to be some economic development that Utah Navajo will benefit. And majority of the Navajo, as we go travel in the different chapters, they support PLI initiative. They don't support the coalition proposal. It's only written for the people, by few people. And this is how we feel about it. It caused a lot of division. Their proposal caused a lot of division in the Utah community, even in the family as well as with the friends. This is how much it has caused us pain this week. This is why we oppose it, and I one of them oppose this proposal. Thank you for the opportunity to get my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, and grateful to have such an enthusiastic audience with us today as well. Our next and final witness today is Mr. Lewis Singer. Mr. Singer is a Navajo Indian from Kayenta, Arizona. He graduated with 3 degrees from Brigham Young University in education. He's been an educator, serving as a school administrator on and off the reservation for the San Juan School District for over 30 years. Upon his retirement, he worked for Utah State University Eastern at the Blanding campus for 5 years. Lewis and his wife Donna have 7 children, 21 grandchildren, and get this, were foster parents to 57 Navajo boys. That is a lot of boys. Mr. Singer's wife, Donna, was instrumental in helping to establish the Utah Navajo Health System in San Juan County. The Utah Navajo Health System now has 4 clinics and even helped build the Blue Mountain Hospital right here in Blanding. Mr. Singer.
Thank you, Senator Lee. I want to thank you and the Senate Committee, Energy Committee and Natural Resource Committee for being here today. As you can see, we have a lot of people that are very concerned about this issue here today. And this hearing is vital for our, what happens in the future to our land here, all the Native Americans and the Indian people and the Bilagana people, the white people that reside in this community. We're having this meeting in their behalf, and I'm grateful that those that Governor Herbert, our commissioners are here today. I know that Rebecca's in California on another assignment, or she would be here. And our bishop, we appreciate your attendance here today. And so the Bears Ear Coalition has recommended that 1.9 million acres of San Juan County be designated for a national monument. On the land that is being proposed for a monument, the Native people, the Indian people, and local people have been able to gather, to hunt, to gather wood and traditional medicinal herbs, and hold traditional ceremonies. National monument status will restrict access to the land, require payment of entrance fees, and may restrict or prohibit traditional activities such as hunting, gathering wood, picking pine nuts, as Chester just mentioned, acquiring medicinal herbs, and performing ceremonies on the land. This past year, I've had the opportunity to go into Bullfrog, Halls Crossing, Waweep, and other monuments, and I've had to pay a fee every time I've entered those monuments. And I think you'll find the same restrictions at other monuments as well. Secret meetings have been held by supporters of a national monument to encourage Native Americans to believe that a monument will help them reclaim land that they lost. Our elderly people are really enticed with the idea that they can reclaim their land, which we think will never happen. And so opponents of the monument have been denied access to these meetings because they were not invited or admitted. And also brochures have been developed and passed out among the Native people in an effort to get their support for a monument. These brochures declare that the Native people will still be allowed access to the land and conduct their traditional activities, but the restrictions that will be enforced once the land becomes a national monument will not allow for these activities. As you see, some of our youth people that performed at the beginning of this meeting, they came to a meeting that we held here a week ago, and they were denied access by their leader to the meeting that was being held in White Mesa because they were against the monument. The Navajo people can tell you that this is the truth based on their experiences with the Waputki and Kangin-de-Shea National Monuments in Arizona. In Waputki, generations of Navajo sheep herding has almost disappeared due to the National Park Service's limiting access to the land that Navajo families had managed since the 1870s. Now all that remains of a once thriving Navajo community is a Navajo elder woman whose home will be claimed by the National Park Service when she dies. In Kangin-de-Shea, the federal government has removed more than 300 sacred tribal relics and human remains from Navajo property. The Navajo Nation, I hope, would never have had agreed to this monument designation if they had known what was going to happen beforehand. The Navajo people have given up enough of their tribal lands for national monuments. as well as our Anglo people have or will be giving up land. 1.9 million acres is many times more land than many other national monuments. How can we, as a Native people, as people of this county, trust the United States government when they provide reservations, for example, and then come back and claim them as national monuments? We ask the Secretary of the Interior to extend consideration of this action and complete more review of the negative consequences that a national monument will put on the local people, and especially the Native people who have fought for America, even after the degradation that they experienced at the hands of the federal government. My father and uncle were both code talkers. My nephew fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, along with many other Native soldiers for the American people. My brothers served in the military, taking away access to land which they and their families use and honor, and which was established on tribal lands such as Kangadashay and Wapaki by the federal government doesn't seem like very much gratitude for their sacrifices and service. I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you so much for your prepared remarks, which were very insightful. I'm now going to ask a few questions of our witnesses. After we're finished with that portion of it, we will gavel out from the hearing. Then we'll begin the town hall component of this meeting, where we'll have opportunity to hear from members of the public. I'd like to start with Mr. Singer and Mr. Johnson. I just want to ask you generally to describe to us very briefly, what kind of impact has the debate surrounding the proposed Bears Ears National Monument had on your communities?
Well, just to give you an example, just this past year, I've had the opportunity of delivering firewood to an elderly grandmother down at Monment Valley twice, because she was out of firewood, and that's what she depended on for heat and for cooking. And so that's one example. And then later on, when we had a big snowstorm here in this area, one of the leaders called me from down at Monument Valley chapter and asked just if we could bring firewood down to the chapter for people that were relying on firewood to heat their homes and to cook and that kind of thing. And so I went to one of our church leaders here and in our community here, and he was very gracious in allowing us to load a pickup truck and also a trailer load full of firewood, so that those people could sustain themselves and relying on the firewood that they depend on in this area.
Mr. Johnson, anything to add there?
Yes, I'd like to add that we still depend on Bears Ear region for hunting. I think this is going to be limited. This is going to be eradicated to the limit that we're not going to be allowed. And this is something that we just don't just hunt for meat. We just use the buckskin for ceremony also as well. To some extent, this is going to be very limited. Also, we came on for enjoyment and for spiritual practice. It's going to be some level it's going to be diminished. Also, that we were not allowed to come on to pick piñons, which Bears Ear region is grow a lot of good piñons and red berries that which Navajo still use it. Come on also, and for those people that are making basket makers, I'm sure they go up there for a good willer, cut them, and make it basket in that way that they sell it for some benefit in the convoys. These are things I think it's going to be very limited. It will be eliminated to some extent.
Thank you. Thank you. Governor Herbert, as governor of Utah, you have occasion to interact regularly with officials from the federal government, including officials from the executive branch of government. Tell me how you think the designation of a national monument at Bears Ears, how would that impact the interaction you have, the interaction between the governor's office and the White House, or more broadly, the interaction between the state of Utah, the government of which you oversee as its chief executive, and the federal government generally?
Well, I understand the issue is one that's emotional. And for the people particularly close to the area in question, it becomes very personal. And we need look no farther than what happened 20 years ago when we had the Grand Staircase Escalante monument, and we still have the scars today, 20 years later.
Tell me what you mean by that, the scars. What?
People don't trust the federal government. Again, that process, I mean, talk about a bad process. Our congressional delegation, every one of them was lied to. Our governor found out about the designation of the monument by reading it in the Washington Times. The president went and stood across in a neighboring state to make the declaration, didn't even come to Utah, had no public input. So that was probably the worst of the worst. I would shudder to think if that was the same thing was to happen here today. So we still have the scars, we still have the anxiety, we have the animus, the anger, and the monument here will be divisive. I've said it's not a matter of should we protect the Bears Ears area. Everybody has, I think, consensus on that. But the process of how we do it makes a big difference in the relationships between the state of Utah and all of Utah's 3 million people and the federal government, if we feel like they did it to us again, as opposed to doing with us. The PLI is with us. It's consensus. It's the appropriate way to do it, where we can all feel a part of the outcome and buy into it. The designation of monument is somebody kind of sticking it to us for whatever reason. And some of it, as the Congress said, feels like it's just political.
So in other words, if you were advising, yes. If you were advising the President of the United States, and he were asking your advice, you might be inclined to tell him, look, you guys own 2/3 of our state. That is a lot of our state to own. And one would think that if you want to own that much of a state, you might want to have a good relationship with its residents and a good relationship with its governor and its elected officials throughout the state. That certainly should be taken into account heavily when deciding to take a step like this.
Absolutely. If it's really about protecting and preserving areas of critical need, I get it. But the PLI does much more than that. It protects even beyond the Bears Ears and preserves and protects there. So again, if it's really about what we can do to manage correctly the public lands, the PLI is a much better vehicle to get that done, which brings us together rather than divides us as a national monument would do.
Many of the promises the Obama administration has made to the Bears Ears Coalition may well be sincere. But history, in my opinion, suggests that many of those promises are likely to prove hollow, just based on our track record, based on the track record of the federal government, based on the track record of federal land managers in their interactions with the people of Utah. Now, should President Obama decide to create a national monument, to put out a proclamation under the Antiquities Act designating the Bears Ears as a national monument, current law, in my opinion, provides no certainty for Native Americans to continue practices that are essential to their way of life, that are important to them for spiritual and historical and cultural reasons. If you remember one thing from today's hearing, only one thing, if you forget everything else, just remember this. There is no law, there is no judicial precedent that guarantees that Native Americans will have continued access to or use of their sacred sites on this land if that land is in fact designated as a national monument. There is nothing in existing law that provides that guarantee. Now, Now, to be clear, some are going to respond to this, and they're going to point out that prior national monument proclamations have cited a handful of statutes that sound like they guarantee some of these protections. But we discovered that upon further examination, they've proven to be completely toothless. President Obama has cited Executive Order number 13007, which tells land managers to accommodate access to and ceremonial use of Native American sacred sites. But these supposed protections that are often invoked by people who are wanting to promote the idea of a national monument, quickly deteriorate. The supposed accommodation is qualified by language limiting Native Americans' access to these lands. Quote, and I'm quoting now, Representative Bishop referred to this earlier, to the extent practicable, permitted by law, and not clearly inconsistent with the agency, close quote. Now, you don't have to be a lawyer to look at that and realize that that's a loophole that is so wide you could drive a 747 and an Airbus A380 through it side by side. Moreover, Executive Order 13007 does not provide a cause of action. What does that mean? Well, it means if they violate it,